welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past shows are available in podcast form. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. Send us your questions and comments, dj@ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And here we are. well, we are here.
Yes, we are.
I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And welcome to another show in the endless series of The Soul of the Everyman. Well, someday it will end.
Things end.
All things grind to an end under the sun, but not tonight. So I'm not sure if that makes you happy or sad, but it doesn't matter because we're going to carry on anyway. So just as darkness is the absence of light, evil is not a thing unto itself. It is merely the absence of good.
Yes. Yes, it's true.
It's true, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, because we have a great quote from Uncle Al, the kitty's pal. One of my personal favorites, Albert E. Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
The E was for intelligent. Well, I'm just in the mood tonight. Anyway, so Uncle Albert had a lot of pithy quotes because he was a sort of a certifiable genius. But this one kind of struck us because I think it was last show that we were talking about. And, it was a different topic entirely. But one of the things we said in the last show was that, in essence, there is no such thing as darkness. It's merely the absence of light. And that kind of, we sent us off looking for, I think that we were paraphrasing, or one of us was paraphrasing Uncle Albert. And so we went off and found the quote. And I think that it's a very good topic, because it is true that we see darkness and light as opposites, and I believe we see them as equals. And nothing can be further from the truth in one regard, because darkness, or the absence of energy, is not a thing. It's like saying that a vacuum is a thing. A vacuum is the absence of all matter. Darkness is the absence of energy, or of energy in the frequency bands that we call light anyway. Mm-hmm. And just as people give the same kind of weight to what we call good and what we call evil, and you can't really personify or give evil a not a personhood, but a beinghood. It isn't anything. It's merely the absence of something. And I think if we turn our thought of the way we look at darkness and the way we look at perhaps evil, or the way we look at a vacuum and think, it's not a thing. It's really the absence of a thing. That isn't to say, though, Margaret, that the absence of something is not, in and of itself, a hardship. The absence of air will rapidly make you uncomfortable. So you see, there's three things in this, and that's what I think is important to understand. There is good. There is the absence of good, which we'll call evil. But there's the third thing, and that's the most important thing, which is the one who experiences. It's a very kind of quantum thing, because you can have in a quantum particle, you can have both states simultaneously represented. A quantized particle, an entangled quantized particle, cannot be said to have any state until one thing happens, a seminal event. It is observed, or experienced is another way of putting that. You have to experience something in order to in order to quantify it, in order to solidify it, in order to take it out of this indeterminate, unexperienced state.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Out of a state of nothingness, it just suddenly defined. And that is the interesting thing about this. I think perhaps we should read Albert Einstein's quote.
Yes, but you do that, because Uncle Al, you're much better at Uncle Al than I am.
God did not create evil. Just as darkness is the absence of light, evil is the absence of God.
Einstein.
And I believe what you had said in the beginning, that is the part of the problem. That people are equating the two.
Yes.
And in fact, they are opposites, but they are not equal.
Right.
And that's, in man's mind, the tendency is to believe that one equals the other.
Right. We often easily fall into dualities.
Well, duality is fascinating, especially when you begin to explore it. But there are assumptions that the mind makes that you have to draw attention to. And to believe that something is the same as something else implies a certain level of weight or matter or substance. And the truth is, there's no substance. Amazing thought. It is lacking substance of any kind. It has no weight. It is empty. And to think in those terms, there's absolutely no light, because darkness is the absence of light. We're talking all light. It's more than just the spectrum of what our human eyes can see. Because frankly, we only perceive about 5% of the frequencies that are available in this universe. And that's a mind-boggling thought. So we're talking about the absence of all light, not just the stuff that humans can't see.
Can see. But yeah, no, it's interesting, the 95% that we can't experience. We can experience it in other ways, of course. But even if you took every frequency that humans can be subjected to, everything from 0 all the way up to the hardest of hardest X-rays, gamma rays, and so on, what we call light is a very, very small portion of that. However, darkness, or the complete absence of energy, implies so many things. There is really no place in the universe which can be said to be entirely dark. And that would be both a physical reality as well as a sort of an impossibility. And one of the reasons for that would be that the mere presence of matter, or really even the mere presence of what we call vacuum, does, by its nature, by its physical nature, contain some form of energy. There's a what's called the vacuum energy, which is not as sucky as it sounds, but the vacuum energy is literally particles that appear out of nothing, out of absolutely nothing, and then disappear into absolutely nothing. There's sort of a background hum to the universe, which is sort of, again, a thing which is to our human minds sort of incomprehensible. Like, where is it coming from? There isn't a place it's coming from. There's no where in this equation. It's not even when it's coming from. There's no when, because where and when are both dimensions of space and time. This is coming from something beyond those dimensions. The mere existence of space without any other matter within it implies a certain degree of energy. There's sort of a tension to the universe, like a big balloon. It's not a balloon in the sense that a balloon is filled with air, but it's a balloon because it's got a presence. The vacuum energy is presence energy. And in that regard, presence in and of itself, we think of presence as, things you get at Christmas. But no, we think of presence as sort of a being state. The universe has its own, let's say, constant being state that is, let's say, not below our perceptions, it's sort of beyond our perceptions. Yet we are part of it. And in the connection of the universe to the all, and by I mean that the physical universe to the all, which is beyond the actual universe itself, it has to have in and of itself a presence. But there's something even more that's implied by that, even more deeply. The existence of the universe implies by quantum mechanics an external observer. And I think when we think of the universe, it is in essence dimensionless from the point of view of the external observer. It can be thought of as a universe that is infinite and vast. It can also be thought of as a point, as a dimensionless point. And it goes a little bit to some of the mathematics you were talking about, the wonderful explanation you were telling me about, where a mathematician you were looking at on YouTube derived all the dimensions, starting with the 0th dimension. The derivation is sort of an analog of what we came from, this dimensionless 0th point, which you then, in essence, build a universe out of merely by observing it and by letting it, in essence, expand into itself. It's a beautiful thing to look at from that point of view, that the universe's presence implies a certain amount of energy, and therefore, in one way, there is no darkness. There's never darkness in the universe.
Hey.
That was too far, huh?
Oh, I'm looking at that going, all right, you have to begin by defining the terms. And without that, there is no referent.
Go for it.
Me? I'm... All right. When you say implies presence, what presence are you defining?
Well, that the even in the absence of what we would call matter, even in the absence of what we would call any definable energy state, there is an energy. There's a presence. There is
Present.
Presence, as in
Present.
Yes, presence. Truly a existence-ness to the universe, even without matter in it. If it was a matterless universe, a universe with zero energy, zero matter, just its very existence has a presence, and that presence implies a certain amount of energy to it. We've figured that out from quantum mechanics, but it means to me that it requires an observer as well.
Okay, I get that. But my point being, when you're saying presence, you need I need a definition of what presence is in this respect.
What would you think I'm trying to say? Well, what I mean by presence is existence itself implies a certain amount of presence, that it exists. It is. It is the difference between is and is not. And I think we started with darkness being the absence of energy, the absence of all things. Even if you remove all what we call energy, all of what we call matter, you still have the presence of the universe itself. The actual thing still exists, even without the consequences of the existence of the universe. Let me back up a little bit. The consequences of the existence of the universe are energy and matter. In other words, they come from the dimensionless point. As we know from even all the best theories say, the universe basically just blossomed out of what? We don't know. Out of nothing. In doing so, its very presence then engendered matter, engendered energy, engendered all these things. The observer, to take from what was in essence an undefined state, observes it, and then it becomes. This is what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to go to the instant before the universe actually became anything. That observation of the universe's presence was enough to start the whole ball rolling, if you ask me.
Okay. In mathematics, what's done is that you just assume nothing. We are looking at a concept or
an abstraction?
Yes, but this, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you must lay a groundwork down in order to relay the concept. And existence, meaning what you're saying is presence within a field. Okay, you have a field and the field is frankly man's mind. So you have a field, and then the moment something comes into that field, you're saying existence occurs. Is that correct?
Well, if you make man's mind the observer, yes. Let's back up to what we started with, which was the fact that you can have an indeterminate state, a particle which has neither one nor zero but both, right? Then you experience it, and you can tell whether it's one or zero or spin this way or spin that way.
Okay. Where do you want this conversation to land? Because there are three major thought forms right there, and I'm looking at this going,
where do you want this conversation to land? That's great. I don't know.
Oh. Oh, Lordy.
I was hoping at the bar down the street. Man. All right. Well, let's reel this in a little bit. So we're saying Mike is crazy. Let's move on. let's go back.
No, I
Let's
am
go
not
back to.
saying that.
I'm saying it. Let's go back to Uncle Albert. So let's start with something that's more closer to our hearts, if you will. Uncle Albert's quote: "God did not create evil." In one sense, we could say that the implication of a being which is beyond all things is in essence an implication of the presence of that being. Would you go with me that far?
All right. Say it again.
We said God did not create evil. Okay. So our premise was that evil is just the absence of God, or the absence of good. It is not a thing unto itself. So I'm just saying that if you put a being which is all, which is in essence outside of the observable or existential universe, that being observes all things. Yes? And if you want to look at way, just as the energy that is within this universe, the light that is within this universe, is merely, if you look at the whole thing as a continuum, there's just a variation of the amount of energy. There's never none. What we call darkness is just less light. If we could actually get to the complete absence of light, I think it would be outside the bounds of the existential universe, of the universe which actually can exist, because all pieces of it have, by their very presence, existence, and by their very existence, energy. So there's no part of this, the whole thing, which is completely dark, which is completely devoid of any energy, which implies to me that there is an observer for the whole thing. I'm not just talking about, individually within the universe. Yes, we have particles, but if you look at the whole thing, it all has to be observed. And therefore it's all, in essence, only in presence because of the constant observation by a being which is outside of it. That's what I was trying to get to.
So what you're saying is that if it is outside of observation,
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. This is what you're saying.
Yeah.
All that to get to this point.
Yes. Well, I thought.
I understand.
Point.
The point is wrong. I'm saying that if this is the core of the point, then we can go to the concept of without the observer, existence is not.
Exactly.
Right. About number theory is something that repeats that particular echo of creation through time.
Yes.
Okay. So the 0th dimension, because we say we are living in the 3rd dimension, and in fact, theoretically, there are supposed to be a total of 11 dimensions. So trying to observe what that is, our easiest observation is 2-dimensional, which is like a sheet of paper. It just has length or width, but no depth. So you can extrapolate from that. In other words, if you were a being on this flat dimension, what would you be seeing? Because we see things 3rd dimensionally, but it has its limitations. Just as if you had, say, the obvious example is a ball in a box. When you came into the room, you would see the box, but you could not see the ball. If we were truly, completely third dimensional, you would see the ball, but we cannot. So this in effect is a limitation. We perceive things two-dimensionally plus time, but we project it into 3 dimensions, meaning if we really could absolutely see 3-dimensionally, you'd be able to see everything and through everything, which would be kind of cool, actually. Yeah. So going back to the 0th dimension, 0 is interesting because in mathematics, it not only represents a null or nothing, but it is a singularity point. So it represents all. It represents infinity. It's all inclusive. All inclusive in that dimensional universe. So if you think of creation, think of pulling out a 1 from there, pulling out a -1. The act of pulling it out is subtracting, and you're subtracting a -1 out of there. It becomes a 1, a positive 1 in this dimension. But what is left from the hole that it was pulled out of? What's left is a totality of everything in that universe except that 1. So when it pops into our mindset, it can only register itself as a -1, because totality, if you think of the world in terms of a totality, the reflection back is that -1. So therefore, this is where that when the particle breaks apart and you have a positive spin and a negative spin, as they say, this is part of that. It's understanding that the 1 came out spinning one way, so therefore its reflection has got to spin the other.
Right.
And because they came from one wholeness, it doesn't really matter its locality. They are still in relationship one to the other. That spooky action at a distance is because they are actually part of a whole.
Right. And we can relate this back. I think we're going to have to go to break in a minute, but let's relate this back to the darkness and the light. In essence, when you start with the 0, you start with the totality, the observer outside the totality. You remove from the totality, let's call it light. You remove light. You reflect darkness.
You remove a quanta of light.
Yes.
And you are left
with
its reflection, which means that the only thing it can show you is the fact that it's missing that quanta. It's missing a -1 quanta. You pulled out a 1 positive quanta,
right? And
it can only reflect back that it's missing a quanta, a -1.
Right. And yet, the -1 doesn't have its own existence. It doesn't. It only exists because you removed. It's a reflection.
It's a reflection.
Or a balance between the two. You start this process, and from the totality, the singularity, that one action, the observation of the removal of the one, you suddenly get a whole universe out of that. And that's how, what I'm trying to say is that one, this duality, this idea that darkness is the opposite of light is not true. The duality is darkness is a reflection of light being moved out of the totality. Moving is the wrong term here.
I would have flipped it. I would have said that you're taking a -1 out of that whole, a -1, which means you're taking out a negative quanta, which turns it into this.
Right, and I would say that let there be light in that regard.
Right.
And with that, since we've created the universe on the other side of the break, we're going to explore it a little bit further.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side, as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
Hi, this is Hannah Ruth from the band Wild Hum. Check out our new Americana Soul CD, Wild Hum, at our website, wildhummusic.com. And you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Thank you.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lynes, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Scott. And we have spirited discussions during the break, but we're not going to go into them. But this may have started some bar fight somewhere, but we're going to go on anyway. So I think that your premise, Margaret, is exactly correct. It is not the removal of a quanta of light. In essence, the arising of that quanta through removing its reflection, if you will. But I think the duality that we always run into as human beings, as participants in this universe, in this common dream, the duality we always run into is that we like to think of things in two dimensions. You mentioned it before. If we truly were three-dimensional perceivers, okay,
right.
if we could see in three dimensions, we could see, in just looking at an object, you would see all sides of it. You're perceiving it in three dimensions, like a hologram. Instead, our brains, as you said also last half hour, our brains take what is in essence a two-dimensional representation of reality, and through the magic of our processing, we are able to project what is a representation of a three-dimensional space. You can, if we were truly three-dimensional beings, you could, with your eyes closed, walk into a space and perceive it, because it has nothing to do with the reflection of energy from surfaces that you then gather. But we're not. We are two-dimensional perceivers with the extra dimension that we experience, which is called time. There's also what's called the arrow of time. And all that means is that we see time in a causal way. We see the universe as this gets that. This is also not a three-dimensional way of looking at it, or not even a three-dimensional time way of looking at it. So we're two-dimensional perceivers that are nailed to looking only in one direction of time. In other words, we don't even get to look back. We have memories of what happened, but we don't ever get to move backward and forward. So in one sense, our incarnations and our perceptions are extremely limited. They're merely a very fast painting of the past, let's say a few milliseconds of some light that we gathered. And from that tiny amount of information over a very short period of time, built up over time after time after time, like snapshots, we create a perception of reality. But it's extremely limited.
Right. It is. We are processing snapshots continually. As you said, if we were living three-dimensionally, we would be able to perceive everything in terms of a holographic image continually without sight, which is interesting. If you think of sight, what you're doing is it's all light coming into your eyes, and the perception of depth is because you have two eyes.
Yeah. When you walk into a room and close your eyes, you do have one three-dimensional sense. It's your hearing. Hearing hears around corners. Hearing hears things that you can't see. And we accept it rather naturally that we can hear things that we can't see. But it's truly the representation of a three-dimensional space in a different sense. We also have certain tactile senses, which can be said to be three-dimensional. You can hold both sides of a cup, but you can't see your other fingers on the other side. Gosh, they could have disappeared, but they're there because you can feel all the way around an object. But these senses are limited in the sense that to hear, you have to hear, within a certain space. Yes, perhaps it's a few hundred yards or whatever it is, but there's a certain space. There's a transmission of that energy, which is relatively slow. So our perceptions are more geared towards sight. But sight is a two-dimensional thing. Still in three dimensions. Our three-dimensional senses, our tactile sense and our auditory sense, in those three dimensions, you don't even think 2 seconds about the fact that you can hear somebody in another room. How can I hear them? I can't see them. Well, of course you can still hear them. That's a very three-dimensional sense, isn't it? It means that somehow a thing that you can't see that's is separated from you entirely in space can be perceived. That's what a three-dimensional sight would be like. It would be, as you said, seeing all sides of all things infinitely. It might be very difficult to navigate, but then again, if were we adapted to do so, it might be an amazing sort of navigation.
Yes. Well, again, if we take, I'm looking at in terms of the next step in evolution, you'll be able to see that using another extended sense. But going in this direction means that we must accept the fact that there are things that we just cannot physically perceive. And what I find fascinating is that the mind may say that about the senses, but it never says that about its own thinking.
True.
It never seems to make room for the fact that it cannot understand everything. When you're speaking with a number of people, they just tell you, well, oh, I know, and that's the end of the conversation. They aren't willing to open to have a discussion about a concept. And what I found is it's normally an assumption on terms. That's why it's so important to clarify terms, because you're trying to communicate. And therein, this, even just this problem alone simply defines the greater problem of communicating a concept one to the other in this three-dimensional world. I guess it's part of sharing, dreaming the common dream.
Yeah, and well, we have wandered far afield a bit, but I agree. These questions, especially these questions of the appearance of dualities, and by dualities I mean things which appear to either imply the existence of one or the other, like light and shadow, good and evil, are symptomatic of the two-dimensional perceptions that we are comfortable with. We're comfortable with dualities, and we're comfortable with this dimensional parsing, especially at the mental level, because it simplifies things. If you say to somebody that you're bad and I'm good, it kind of gets things started. You can say, well, everything you say I don't have to listen to because you're bad. This idea of giving, of not allowing the duality, saying that in essence what we call evil is just the absence of good. You could also turn that into what I am labeling as bad is merely my limited perception, my lack of understanding of what that other may be trying to say. So our our shorthand good and bad, which isn't necessarily whether something has true, whether it's truly right, for argument's sake, but this limited sort of not me, not me, is really a shorthand, a way of cutting off rather than trying to communicate. Communication is the process where you, in essence, extend yourself, allow what you feel is not you to come in, allow what you allow yourself to, in essence, experience the other, and perhaps you come to a point where you aren't merely trying to enforce the duality and merely trying to make sure that whatever is on that side is considered,
Well, it depends on whether or not you really want communication, or
Exactly.
are you just trying to say that this is what I feel is right, and anything outside of my definition of right means it's wrong. I mean, there's no flexibility, there's no opening for a communication at that point. It's defining your terms very clearly and what field of definition you're going in. The absence of light in general, that darkness, there's nothing you can do in that darkness. That's flatline. No brainwave.
Yeah. If we're drawing it like that, if we're saying that in essence, a different sort of duality, life and death, if you will, flatline, or somebody which is still living and breathing and incarnating down here, that's a different sort of flatline. But I'm not sure where you're going with that argument. Where are you going with that?
Just that the concepts. This is where we started. It had to do with the concepts of darkness being the absence of light, and evil being the absence of God,
or the absence of good. Because I think though that we were correct in saying, and still are correct in saying, that evil isn't of itself a presence, it's an absence. Darkness is not of itself a presence, it's an absence, or a lesser thing. That duality is comfortable, and it is also it's also a tautology in some regards. You merely saying that darkness is an absence of something is we could say that's perforce true, or at least it seems obvious. But I think that it's when you abstract it and say that evil is a thing, rather than evil is just an absence of something else, is where people go wrong. And the comfortableness of defining evil or defining darkness as a thing is where you end up with people taking a side, or where you end up with people trying to say that the darkness is consuming the light. We know that's not true. It can't do so. If whatever amount of light comes into the darkness lessens the darkness. It doesn't grow. The darkness can't grow. It can only be not. And I love the concept, this mathematical abstraction that you were explaining in the previous half hour, is that in essence the negative, if we want to define that, the absences are reflections, and if you were to put the light back into the totality of all, by without any effort whatsoever, all the reflections vanish as well. So the recombination of the universe into the singularity doesn't require anything to come back, if you know what I mean. it just suddenly is the singularity again, because you never have to take anything. You never have to put it. Yeah.
At the end of time.
Yeah.
Things return back to a whole, or what was it that Penrose said?
In essence, the singularity is nothing more than the perception of time in that slightly unbalanced universe. Once you get that one quanta that's out of place, the universe blossoms forward. Time starts. When you get to the end of time, all of a sudden it's the singularity again, because
it all comes back into a wholeness or a singularity.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Because and then it can repeat itself.
Right. And I think the other interesting thing is that, again, in this Penrose universe, let's call it this Penrose repeating universe, is that the times between universes there are no times between universes.
Because time doesn't exist.
Exactly. So he also has said, and this is another interesting part of Penrose's universe, is that all matter moving forward in time is merely a reflection of the antimatter moving backward in time. Once time stops, everything recoalesces instantly, and then
recoalesces
instantly because there is no time. And then again, because we're time-based beings, we don't get this. There's no time before the next universe starts again, because there is no time. So, in essence, it's always at the beginning. It's always at the end. It's always in the middle, if you know what I mean. No one part of the universe's existence can be said to be before another part of the existence or after it. It's all happening at the same, and this is the wrong word to use, but it's the only word we have. It's all happening at the same time in a different sort of dimension of what we call time.
It's all happening in the same instant. So instant meaning trans-time.
Yes.
Which is what singularity means. It has no time. So in and I can't use the word space
No.
but in a dimension where it does not it's beyond bounds at this point. There's no limitations going on. And because we are creatures of time, it is very difficult to make the leap into a place that is no time. So there, in this no time dimension, everything is accessible.
Yes.
And all times are accessible throughout the repeating universes.
Yes.
Or the multitude of universes.
Yes. Although I think Penrose would say that none of those words capture it, and we don't have a word for it.
We don't have a word for it.
because even the mathematics gets really scary weird at that point, and the words are not even close. So, yet, and this is where I kind of went off the rails, and you railed me back in, but I'm going to go a little bit off again. All of this requires, because of what we understand of quantum mechanics, an observer.
Right. And frankly, the fact that we have life at all, and we are actually able to exist on a world that supports life, because frankly, we haven't found any place else that has life. There's a lot of theories out there.
Well, there's two things we haven't found: life or coffee. So I think they're intimately intertwined.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my theory, and I'm sticking with it.
Okay. Well, the fact that life itself, for it to occur, mathematically speaking, the probability of that happening is ridiculous. So ridiculous that basically it needs to have an intelligence for it to be there.
And certainly, it's certainly not the absence of intelligence. Let's put it that way. We've ranged all over the place tonight, but we have gone somewhere or other.
Okay.
This has been The Soul of the Everyman, and I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.